Hello and welcome to Trek Facts, a web series that takes a fun and fast look at the fundamentals of Star Trek. In today's episode, Part 3, we're taking a look at time travel within the United Federation of Planets from the year 2371 to 3200. In 2374, Captain Benjamin Sisko and the crew of the USS Defiant raced to answer a distress call from Captain Lisa Cusack of the USS Olympia. Upon arrival at the planet, however, the Defiant crew quickly discovered an energy barrier surrounding the planet that Captain Cusack's ship had crashed on. Penetrating the energy barrier, the landing party found Captain Cusack's dead body and discovered that she, in fact, had been dead for 3 years, speaking to the Defiant's crew through time because of the Metreon radiation within the energy barrier. Stranded in the Delta Quadrant, the USS Voyager, under the command of Captain Catherine Janeway, would encounter many temporal anomalies, and as such, Captain Janeway would receive a bad reputation with the Department of Temporal Investigations. In 2371, while conducting routine maintenance, the USS Voyager would encounter a Type 4 quantum singularity. This singularity would wreak havoc with local spacetime, creating time-delayed reflections of Voyager itself. Shortly thereafter, while exploring a planet which seemed to have been destroyed by an immense catastrophe, Captain Janeway and Lieutenant Tom Paris would be thrown one day into that planet's past. Realizing the catastrophe which caused the planet's destruction was actually the fault of Voyager and its crew, Captain Janeway was able to prevent the disaster, and as a result, the timeline was altered to one in which the planet was not destroyed, and Voyager went on her way, with only Kes having knowledge of the original timeline. Later in 2371, Voyager would encounter a micro-wormhole in an advanced state of decay. Discovering this wormhole led to the Alpha Quadrant, Voyager would use a probe which had become stuck within the wormhole to make contact with a Romulan vessel. Realizing they could then use the probe as a transporter relay to beam Voyager's entire crew back to the Alpha Quadrant, Voyager began a series of experiments to test the viability of that plan. Eventually, Voyager was able to beam the Romulan commander through the wormhole to the ship, but quickly discovered that the wormhole was not only a portal through space, but through time as well, as the Romulan commander, Telek Ramor, was from the year 2351, 20 years in Voyager's past. As a result, Voyager was forced to abandon their plan and continued on their journey towards the Alpha Quadrant. In 2372, Voyager would end up bouncing back and forth through time when Voyager rescued an imprisoned Q. This Q, being imprisoned to prevent himself from being able to commit suicide, would attempt to avoid the Q continuum by hiding Voyager in the past at the moment of the Big Bang. Ultimately not successful in his attempts, Janeway would agree to hold a hearing between the two Q in an effort to break the stalemate between the two omnipotent beings. In early 2373, the Federation timeship Aeon from the 29th century would travel back in time and attempt to destroy the USS Voyager, in an effort to save the entire timeline from being destroyed. Captain Braxton, believing Voyager was at fault for the destruction after recovering metal from Voyager's hull, would attempt to erase Voyager from the time stream, and Janeway, in an effort to save her crew, would end up destabilizing the temporal rift, causing Voyager to end up back in the year 1996. Discovering the computer revolution of the late 20th century was a direct result of Captain Braxton encountering a man named Henry Starling, who would steal Braxton's ship and reverse engineer many of its components, building an entire business empire for himself. To set the timeline to right, USS Voyager would attempt to retrieve the timeship, while Starling himself would attempt to head to the future in an effort to retrieve further technology for the past. Starling would be unsuccessful, and Voyager would be forced to destroy the timeship, killing Starling, but protecting the future from destruction. Captain Braxton then reappeared in his timeship, and would end up sending Voyager back to its original time period in the Delta Quadrant, having no memory of the events that Janeway and the crew of USS Voyager had experienced. Starfleet believes that this temporal incursion was actually a predestination paradox, though this, of course, cannot be confirmed. But it should be noted, as a direct result of this time travel, Voyager's EMH was left with what was known as a mobile emitter, a piece of future technology which allowed the Doctor to roam freely like any normal humanoid. The ramifications of this part of the temporal adventure are also unknown. Later in 2373, Kes, an Akampa female residing on Voyager, would jump backwards through time from the year 2379 to her birth in 2369. This was a direct result of Voyager's EMH attempting to extend Kes's lifespan using what he termed a biotemporal chamber. As a result, Kes was able to retain limited knowledge of future events and warned Janeway and the crew of Voyager of an upcoming battle with a race known as the Krenim, a battle in which both Janeway and B'Elanna Torres were killed. Due to this foreknowledge, however, those events were altered and both crew members would survive their encounter with the species. In 2375, 7 of 9 would receive a set of phase corrections through her cranial implants during Voyager's attempt to travel at slipstream velocity. These corrections would end up dissipating the slipstream field, dropping Voyager safely into normal space. After an investigation, it was discovered the corrections actually originated from the year 2390, sent by a future Harry Kim who was correcting a mistake he had made during the slipstream trip that ended up destroying Voyager and killing all her crew. In late 2375, Captain Braxton of the Federation timeship Relativity would enlist 7 of 9's help to foil a plot to destroy Voyager with a temporal device. Later on, it was discovered that Captain Braxton himself, from a future time period, was responsible for the temporal incursion and was subsequently placed under arrest by his first officer. Then, Captain Catherine Janeway was enlisted to correct an incursion by the future Braxton in the year 2372, while at the same time being given a warning.
Oh, Captain, Braxton was right about one thing. Voyager shows up on our sensors far too often. Try to avoid time travel.
Then in late 2376, Kes, who had previously left Voyager in the year 2374, returned to Voyager and used Voyager's warp core to travel back to the year 2371, in an attempt to have Voyager captured by the Vidians and return her younger self to the Akampa homeworld. Realizing Kes's plan, Captain Catherine Janeway was forced to kill Kes from the future and then initiated her own plan to prevent the same events from occurring again. Reminding Kes of who she was in the future, Janeway successfully prevented the time loop from occurring, and Kes would leave Voyager to return herself to the Akampa homeworld. In 2377, Voyager would become shattered in space-time, having different sections of the ship existing in different time frames. Commander Chakotay and the crew of Voyager from the separate time periods would work together to restore the ship into temporal sync with the rest of the universe, and would be successful at achieving this. In 2378, a future Janeway, Admiral Janeway, would travel back from the year 2404, bringing technology and tactics in an effort to get Voyager back home much earlier than in the original timeline. To do this, USS Voyager would use a Borg transwarp hub to travel directly to Earth's doorstep. The younger Janeway, however, had different plans, wanting to destroy the transwarp hub and deal a crippling blow to the Borg collective. Eventually working together, the two Janeways would come up with a plan that would see Admiral Janeway infect the Borg Queen with a neurolytic pathogen, which would temporarily disrupt her control over the Borg collective, while her younger self entered the conduit and destroyed the transwarp hub from the inside, staying ahead of the shockwave and eventually reaching Earth. Janeway's lack of concern and at times complete disregard for the dangers of time travel would cause Starfleet to develop more rules and regulations in regards to time travel. as well as eventually expanding the Department of Temporal Investigations and increasing their scope of authority in regards to keeping the integrity of the timeline. Eventually, Starfleet, the United Federation of Planets, as well as most surrounding powers, would sign what would be known as the Temporal Accords, a treaty that at its heart would ensure that no race attempted to use time travel to purposely alter the timeline in an effort to make the future more favorable for an individual or a race. These accords would then become the catalyst for what would be known as the Temporal Cold War. Species who didn't agree with the Federation's position on time travel would then attempt to alter history, while the Department of Temporal Investigations would attempt to correct or prevent these temporal incursions. Generally speaking, this would cause a stalemate between both sides. The outcome of this Temporal Cold War is unknown, but Starfleet remains vigilant in its policing of the timeline's integrity. Recently uncovered classified documents suggest that Starfleet may at some point in the future have a major temporal incursion to deal with, as the USS Discovery may have traveled to some point in Starfleet's future, though currently these reports cannot be confirmed.